Today is Thursday, May the 22nd. And what's interesting is in some of these episodes, I'm having people reach out on LinkedIn and comment on some of the things I've talked about relative to my faith, which is interesting because that isn't even the reason why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I'm trying to document creating and starting a business in the US with trying to spend some time in Spain on a kind of a life project. And because I've talked about my faith a little bit, that those comments I've made seem to have percolated or instigated people reaching out on LinkedIn, thanking me for sharing my thoughts. And so today, what I thought I would talk about is what is integrating my faith into my daily business. Like, what does that look like? And I didn't realize that there's maybe a large group of business owners and entrepreneurs that are Christians, but they're not necessarily sure how that plays out every day in their business. And so in the for what it's worth category, I thought I would share what it looks like for me as a Christian. This could be a really, really long episode because I have quite a journey that I have been on since my late 20s and early 30s towards getting to some of the things that I'm sharing today. I guess I would just preface that I generally believe that aside from God being the ultimate entrepreneur, the ultimate creator of value, which is the lens that I see my work through, I also think that he has everyone in a very different place for all sorts of different reasons, theological reasons, spiritual reasons, practical reasons. And so the things that I'm sharing in the next couple of minutes are based on where I am right now at 47 years old, having experienced a ton of failures, some successes. Amongst the things I'm most proud of would be my marriage, my family, and then the businesses that I've gotten the opportunity to serve. So when I think about how to integrate faith into my daily business decisions, I would suggest, with the exception of when I'm talking to lawyers, it's pretty much just a part of what I do every day. You know, I approach each day with an understanding that I will be unable to see what God's doing in my life in the day that I am in. And I can only see what he's doing in my life when I look back and I walk myself through all of the different events and decisions and things that have had to happen to get me here today. But I also believe that everything that is in my hands today, a business is typically people and resources. And so those are the things that are in my hands that I have been tasked with stewarding and leading. And so my faith plays a huge part of it, a huge part of what I do every day, but it's not separate and aside from the life that I'm living either. And so some people, I think, struggle with, I go to church on Sunday, I have a church community, but when Monday morning rolls around, how do I go into my place of work? And how does my faith become evident? And I think there's some basic things. I mean, in the Bible, there's the fruits of the Spirit, which become kind of very obvious. And so if you're struggling to understand what your faith looks like in your business, you might want to just start there. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, etc. And are you working like that? You've heard, if you've listened to these episodes long enough, you'll know that I put a tremendous amount of weight behind the example of Christ and the fact that he every day went to serve people. But even if you're not, if that's a little too abstract, I believe that ultimately him dying on a cross is a reflection of him serving people that were standing there, that watched it happen, and still refused to acknowledge who he was and that he knew those people would be there, and he still continued to serve them. And so that's always been my guiding light, that even if I don't particularly enjoy certain people, if I don't enjoy certain circumstances, that ultimately I'm called to serve. And I'm called, what does that mean? That means looking outward instead of looking inward. And most of the friction I've experienced in my business is when I'm looking inward, when I'm looking at my own pride and my own ego, and using that as how I venture through a particular situation. That's when it starts to get very, very difficult. And every single time I'm prepared to let go of that and I'm prepared to just serve other people, things go a lot easier. And so an example of that would be each day in our business. When something goes wrong, I own it, even if it was a couple of layers removed from me. I stand up and say, look, I'm accountable for that. That was something that I missed because in my position of leadership, I should have made sure we had the systems to make sure that doesn't happen. I should have made sure that I had the training in place, that I had given the right direction and instruction to other people to make sure that that particular thing didn't happen. And so I step up and I own it. And I don't own it so that I can take the burden away from the person who might have made the mistake. I own it because I truly believe that that sets the example of how other people in my business should act as well. Now, if I didn't have a Christian faith, a Judeo-Christian faith, then I don't really have a reason to conduct myself in that way. I would do what most businesses do, which would be to reprimand someone or to fire them or to make their life really miserable. And that's not to say that I'm a doormat, but it is to say that my first response is to look out and say, how can I serve? And in this particular case, when mistakes get made or things happen, I use it as a feedback loop to say, here's what I need to be doing better. And if I'm not open to that, then I'm not able to obviously solve the problem, and I can't create the type of culture that that people come into where they're all prepared to serve each other and there's an open attitude about it. And so while I appreciate some entrepreneurs will separate their faith from what they're doing every day, for me, the life of Christ informs me about how I should go into my work each day and how I should perform. I spent almost 2 decades as a management consultant serving other entrepreneurs. So my background is in finance. I have an operations mind. I program. I feel pretty comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And so being able to serve entrepreneurs that found themselves in a tough spot where they needed some or all of that was my way to serve. And it hasn't always been to my advantage. In fact, for a long time, it wasn't to my advantage. And I did feel like a doormat. But I've since come around to understand how to do a better job of balancing that, where I can still serve people, but not necessarily be a doormat. And so that can get very frustrating for people who can't say it as easily as I'm saying it, that that's how they should work each day. So my day is informed by the life of Christ. And it's not just in my workplace. I come home, I look to serve my wife best I can. I look to serve my kids best I can. And as a Christian, I have finally reconciled that perfection is not the standard, that working towards perfection is the opportunity. And so in the Bible, Jesus talks about the process of sanctification. If that's a really big fancy word, you can just Google search it and look it up. But basically it means my whole life is going to be spent trying to be better than I was yesterday, but trying to be better according to the standard that the life of Jesus shows us, which is to serve people and to put other people first. And so I find using my faith is, I think most days I catch myself saying, thank God I'm a Christian. Like, I don't even know how someone who isn't a Christian would navigate through the world, because it feels so chaotic and the world feels like it's run by a bunch of crazy people. But when I step back from all of this, I realize that nothing's really changed. I mean, I might be living in a certain time frame in the arc of history, and it might feel chaotic and it might feel insane, but the truth is it's always felt like that for every generation. I don't think that there's a generation, maybe other than the boomers, but that's because I have an opinion about the boomers, but there hasn't really been a generation that hasn't had to deal with chaos and craziness and questioning the world around them. And so I don't think that that's unique to me. And having a faith to stand on grounds me, helps me to work through problems. There was as any kind of Christian will tell you, when they go through a tough time, the book of Job really becomes instrumental in understanding how to interact with those difficulties in life. When times are good, it also informs me to understand that I can't redeem the bad decisions I've made and blame myself for them and then give God all the credit for the good things. That at some point you have to realize that there are good things that come across my path in life every day. There are bad things that come across my path in life every day. But God is using ultimately all of those things to affect his purposes out in the world. And I believe that his purposes are to build his kingdom here on earth. I think if you just wanted a quick picture of what that would look like, it would look like everybody looking out to everybody else to serve them. And it's not achievable by human standards. I think that if you've spent any time reading the Bible and just watching the repeated pattern that humans go through, we fall on hard times, we come to God, we ask him to help us, and then times get good, and then we forget he exists, and we think we're awesome, and then we make a series of bad decisions, and then we're back to where we started. So there's just like this repeated cycle in the Bible that man goes through, that I still think we go through, that aside from all of that, I go through it at 47 years old. I can't tell you how many times I've cycled through that. But without being a Christian, it would be hard to put some edges around it. And so I feel bad. Honestly, I feel bad for Christians that, first of all, don't know how to use their faith in their business. But I feel even worse for people that aren't Christians and I just don't know what it would feel like to run a business but not have a Christian worldview, because it would feel very, very, very hard. In fact, not feel, I think it just would be very, 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 very hard. And so if you are a Christian and you think that integrating your faith into your business decisions is like, I'm going to hold a Bible study in the boardroom every Monday morning and we're going to pray before each meeting, good on you. I don't do that because that's not how I approach each day. I approach each day assuming that God's already at work. And if I'm paying attention, I get to see how he's using me. If I'm being selfish and introspective and prideful, I just get to miss out on watching what he's doing. But things like Bible studies and praying before meetings and, I don't know, having like a scripture reading, I've heard of that working. I haven't had the opportunity to use that, but I also don't think that that's what integrating your faith looks like. I think that integrating your faith is saying, as maybe I do every day, hey, God, this is a great day. I'm really excited to see what you're doing, even if things really suck right now. But I am excited to know that the more they suck, the better they're going to be in the future. I don't know what that looks like, but I do believe that you're working all things out. And so let's get to work. And integrating your faith, to me, is more of an active working out your faith, not like on Sunday, I go to church. On Wednesdays, we hold a Bible study. Like, to me, that's religion. That's a checklist of things that you do. I think that faith is active. I think faith is a conscientious decision to say, on the one end, like I did when I was 30, was like, look, I'm a Christian. I don't really know what that means, but I'm going to try and figure it out. And then I spent a decade learning about all the other religions in the world and finally coming back to a Judeo-Christian belief. Or if it looks like, I am a Christian, but I don't want to hold Bible studies or I don't hold prayer meetings because that feels very orthodox and religious to me. It just starts with a relationship. I think it starts with believing that God is who he says he is. I think it starts with using the life of Jesus as a way to measure your life and figure out where the gaps might be. And again, I don't believe perfection is the objective. I believe that striving towards it is the journey. That's what we get to do every single day. And if we are doing that well, then we get to see God at work in our world around us. And for me, that looks like when I get the opportunity to talk with people in our company that ask me, you seem to be a little bit different in how you run a business. This whole idea that you're here to serve seems a little bit radical. Like, that's not what I'm used to. We work with a type of worker that doesn't get a lot of respect in the marketplace because they're new to the country or they're new to the city or they just don't have the skills that are allowing them to really have some upward mobility options in their life. And so being able to see them be the joy that they get from seeing that they are in fact valuable, because we ensure that their value is recognized by how we treat them, how we give them opportunities, but more importantly, my intention to come into our business every day to lead by example, which means other people are leading by example. And I get to see that come full circle when we either hand out bonus checks, when we see people avoid accidents, when we see a duty of care being used that isn't being used somewhere else. And because I've said I want our company to be the least stressful thing in someone else's life, whether they're a Christian or not, I don't care. I want our business to be run really well so that they're not stressed out and they're not anxious, and that they can go home and take the money they earn, pour it into their family, pour it into their communities, do whatever they need to do with it, but not pour in any of the stress or anxiety that typically comes from work. So because of just a couple of folks that have reached out through LinkedIn and some of the just watching kind of analytically which videos or which episodes seem to be getting the most hits, the ones where I've talked about my faith appear to be the ones that people are most interested in. So today I thought I would take a pass at trying to be intentional about sharing what integrating my faith in my business looks like, in hopes that maybe if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner or a Christian, or you're considering it, or you're lost and this just sounds interesting, that maybe today there's a little stone in your shoe that you'll have to wrestle with or deal with. And in coming episodes, I'll just keep talking more about it as I keep you updated on my plans to get a business in the US going while spending time in Spain, and really, really, really stabilizing our business here in Calgary, and giving our team the opportunity to work autonomously from me, because the business is now at a point where I might just get in the way of where it's going. But I can't walk. I have to make sure that I have done my part to fill in all of the pieces that we currently don't have right now. So anyway, I would be curious to hear how you integrate faith into your business.